There was a time when you believed that love meant healing every wounded soul that crossed your path, that compassion meant carrying burdens that were never yours, that being good meant stitching together hearts that were determined to remain broken. But something shifted, didn't it? You woke up one day, slowly, quietly, perhaps painfully, realizing that you were losing yourself in the process of trying to save others. And today, as you stand on this new ground, you no longer feel the need to fix anyone. In this message, I will take you through the deep, unseen transformation that leads to this powerful freedom. By the end, you will understand why your peace, your energy, your boundaries, and your spirit now demand a higher kind of love, one that doesn't require rescuing anyone. Stay with me till the end. Because this truth will not only set you free, it will remind you of the person you were always meant to be. True growth begins when you stop saving people who refuse to save themselves. It is one of the most painful lessons you will ever learn because it rises slowly, like a truth you tried to outrun for years. You don't wake up one morning and suddenly decide to stop rescuing people. No, this understanding comes after your heart has been stretched thin, after your hands have reached too far, after your hope has been poured into places where it was never honored, never held, never appreciated. You learn it only when life teaches you that love is not measured by how much you sacrifice, but by how much you respect your own spirit. For so long, you believed that helping someone rise meant you had to kneel. You believed that if someone was hurting, it was your responsibility to carry their wounds, their fears, their chaos. Maybe you learned this from childhood, maybe from a broken relationship, maybe from a world that told you compassion meant losing yourself. But the truth is simpler and softer. You can walk beside someone on their journey, but you cannot walk for them. You can offer guidance, but you cannot force clarity. You can give love, but you cannot manufacture willingness. You can open the door, but you cannot make them step through it. There comes a moment, quiet, sharp, and deeply honest, when you realize that no matter how much you give, no matter how deeply you show up, no matter how hard you fight for them, nothing changes if the person you're trying to save does not want change. You cannot heal a wound someone keeps reopening. You cannot guide someone who is committed to staying lost. You cannot uplift someone who chooses to stay anchored in their misery. And you cannot sacrifice your joy, your peace, your purpose for someone who refuses to lift themselves even an inch. The truth is that every soul must walk its own path. Every heart must make its own decisions. Every person must face their own darkness, wrestle their own fears, confront their own patterns, and build their own growth. And when you interfere, when you insist on fixing what is not yours to fix, you are not helping them. You are delaying their awakening. You are placing your hands where life intended them to learn through consequence, discomfort, and personal responsibility. You begin to grow when you stop rescuing others because you finally understand the weight of what it means to rescue yourself. You start to see how much energy you have lost in places where nothing grew. You recognize the exhaustion that comes from repeated cycles, giving, explaining, healing, comforting, only to watch the same patterns repeat again and again. You begin to notice your own emotional bruises, the quiet aches you ignored, the boundaries you dissolved to keep the peace, the self you abandoned while trying to hold someone else together. And then there is a shift, a sacred, powerful shift. You start to see that the people who truly want change do not need you to drag them toward it. They will meet you halfway. They will show effort, humility, honesty. They will take responsibility. They will rise, even if slowly. But the ones who don't want change, no matter how much you pour into them, will not move an inch. They will drain you, not because they are bad people, but because they are not ready, not ready to see their truth, not ready to heal, not ready to rise, not ready to let go of the comfort of their patterns. True growth is realizing that readiness is not something you can force. You grow when you stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You grow when you stop cleaning up emotional messes you didn't create. You grow when you stop dimming your light to soothe someone else's insecurity. You grow when you stop lowering your standards to make others comfortable. You grow when you stop giving second chances to behavior that never changes. You grow when you stop sacrificing your peace for chaos disguised as love. In that moment, you begin to reclaim parts of yourself you forgot. Your energy returns, your focus sharpens, your intuition strengthens. You start listening to that inner whisper that says, "This is not your burden." You begin to feel the freedom of choosing yourself, not selfishly, but wisely. And you learn that choosing yourself is the foundation of every healthy relationship you will ever have. You discover that real love is not rescuing, it is respecting their journey, respecting your limits, respecting the difference between support and sacrifice. You learn that you can care deeply without carrying everything. You learn that you can love someone and still step back. You learn that you can wish the best for someone and still protect your own heart. And you finally accept that stepping away from someone who refuses to grow does not make you unkind, it makes you healthy. There is a powerful peace that arrives when you release the need to fix others. You begin to attract people who are accountable, who respect you, who value your energy, who meet you where you are. You find connections that don't require you to shrink. You build relationships where growth is mutual, healing is shared, and effort flows both ways. And you finally understand what love feels like when it doesn't cost you yourself. The world becomes lighter, softer, clearer. You stop battling storms that were never yours. You stop swimming oceans for people who wouldn't step in a puddle for you. You stop trying to prove your worth through your ability to endure pain. And in return, you find a version of yourself you had buried under the weight of trying to save everyone else. True growth begins the moment you whisper to yourself, "I release what is not mine." It begins when you realize your purpose is not to fix people, but to rise within your own life. It begins when you recognize that you deserve relationships built on effort, honesty, and reciprocity. And it deepens when you learn to stand tall in your truth, knowing that you can love others without losing yourself, and that the greatest act of compassion you will ever offer the world is becoming whole within your own soul. Peace becomes more valuable than people-pleasing. It doesn't happen suddenly. It happens slowly, silently, through the tired corners of your spirit, through the lessons life keeps placing before you, through the exhaustion that finally teaches you what your soul has been whispering for years. Your peace is priceless, fragile, sacred, and no applause, approval, or validation from the world is worth losing it. For so much of your life, you were taught, directly or indirectly, that your worth was measured by how well you could keep everyone around you comfortable. You learned to smile even when your heart trembled. You learned to say yes, even when every part of your being screamed no. You learned to hold your breath so others could breathe easier. You learned to shrink to avoid conflict, to bend to avoid rejection, to mold yourself to avoid judgment. People-pleasing felt like a form of kindness, a form of love, a form of being good. But the truth is that people-pleasing is not kindness. It is self-abandonment masquerading as care. And you begin to see this only after years of stretching yourself thin. At first, it feels noble to be the one who never complains, who always shows up, who always forgives, who always adjusts. It feels honorable to be the one who keeps the peace in the room. It feels meaningful to be admired for your gentleness, your patience, your willingness to carry the load. But slowly, quietly, day by day, something in you begins to bruise. Something begins to feel heavy. Something inside you starts to whisper. There must be more to life than making sure everyone else is happy while you fall apart. You notice the small betrayals first, the ones you commit against yourself, the yes you gave when you wanted nothing more than a moment alone, the forgiveness you offered even though your heart was still hurting, the silence you maintained to avoid someone's anger or disappointment, the boundaries you softened so someone else wouldn't leave, the comfort you sacrificed so someone else could remain comfortable. At some point, you begin to see that the peace you are trying to create for others is stealing the peace you need for yourself. And that realization breaks something open inside you. You start remembering what peace feels like, not the absence of conflict in the room, but the absence of conflict inside your soul, not making others comfortable, but being able to breathe without guilt, not shrinking your truth, but speaking with honesty and still feeling safe within your own skin. You begin to see that peace is not soft, peace is not passive, peace is not weakness. Peace is strength, discipline, clarity. Peace is choosing what aligns with your soul even when your voice shakes. Peace is setting boundaries even when it risks disappointing others. Peace is walking away from what drains you, even if you once prayed for it. Peace is protecting your spirit like it is a treasure, because it is. And when you learn the weight of that truth, people-pleasing loses its shine. You start to notice how often you apologized for things that weren't your fault. How often you said, "It's okay," even when it wasn't. How often you accepted behavior that bruised your heart because you were afraid of being too much, too demanding, too emotional, too honest. You start to recognize that the people who expected you to swallow your pain were the very ones who benefited from your silence. You realize that the ones who loved the easy version of you may never have loved the real you at all. And so the transformation begins, not loudly, but deeply. You stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop bending your back to earn love that should have been freely given. You stop offering access to people who do not value the weight of your presence. You stop saying yes when your soul whispers no. You stop participating in conversations that disturb your spirit. You stop reaching out to people who only meet you halfway when it's convenient for them. With each quiet boundary, you grow a little more. With each honest truth, you become a little lighter. With each act of self-respect, you reclaim a piece of your peace. You start prioritizing the calm you feel when you honor your truth. You start noticing how peaceful your world becomes when you stop chasing approval. You begin valuing the solitude that protects your clarity. You begin loving the version of yourself that no longer needs to perform softness to be accepted. You learn that people-pleasing is rooted in fear. Fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of being unloved, fear of being misunderstood. And peace is rooted in faith, faith in your worth, faith in your voice, faith in your boundaries, faith in the idea that those who are meant for you will never demand that you abandon yourself to be loved. You begin seeing relationships differently. You realize that the ones who truly care for you want you honest, not agreeable. They want your truth, not your compliance. They want your authentic presence, not your silent suffering. They want you to feel safe around them, not small. They want your comfort too, not just their own. And you also learn to let go of the ones who fall away when you stop people-pleasing. Because the truth is simple. Anyone who walks away when you begin honoring your peace was never walking with you. They were walking with the version of you that sacrificed herself for them. You learn to forgive yourself for the years you spent bending. You forgive yourself for mistaking approval for love. You forgive yourself for allowing others to treat your kindness as an open door to misuse. You forgive yourself because you didn't know better, and now you do. Your life begins to shift in ways you never expected. You feel lighter, you feel clearer, you feel more present, you feel more grounded. Your decisions come from alignment instead of fear. Your energy stops leaking into places that were never meant to hold it. Your heart stops fighting battles that were never yours. And slowly, you begin to see the beauty in disappointing others when necessary. Because choosing your well-being is not selfish, it is sacred. You realize that not every battle is yours to fight. Not every request requires your yes. Not every person deserves the softness you once gave so freely. You begin to understand that peace is not something you find outside yourself. Peace is something you protect within yourself. And nothing is worth losing that for. There is a deep maturity in choosing peace, a strength in walking away from noise, a courage in standing firm in your truth, a quiet power in no longer needing to be liked by everyone. Because when you stop living for approval, you start living in authenticity. When you stop people-pleasing, you start soul-pleasing. When you stop seeking validation, you start seeking alignment. And when you choose peace, you choose a life that feels like home, not a life that feels like performance. Peace becomes more valuable than people-pleasing the moment you realize that your life is not an audition. You are not here to be perfect for others. You are here to be whole for yourself. You learn that love without boundaries becomes self-destruction. It is one of the most heartbreaking truths you discover on your journey because it confronts everything you were taught about love, everything you believed love was supposed to be. You grew up thinking love meant giving endlessly, forgiving endlessly, showing up endlessly, even when your spirit was tired and your heart was trembling. You thought love meant sacrificing your comfort, your needs, your time, your peace, your dreams, all in the name of being good, being loyal, being devoted. But slowly, painfully, you begin to realize that love without limits, love without lines, love without self-respect is not love. It is erosion. It is the slow unraveling of your soul. At first, it feels noble to love deeply, wholeheartedly, unconditionally. You believe that if you pour enough compassion into someone, they will soften. If you forgive enough, they will change. If you stay long enough, they will value you. You tell yourself that love is supposed to endure, that it is supposed to hurt, that it is supposed to require more and more of you. But what no one told you is that love, true love, does not ask you to diminish yourself. It does not ask you to abandon your needs. It does not ask you to disappear so someone else can shine. Real love grows within boundaries. Without them, it becomes a slow, burning fire that consumes everything you are. You learn this truth through experience, the kind that leaves scars. You learn it when your kindness is mistaken for weakness. You learn it when your forgiveness becomes permission. You learn it when your silence becomes a green light for disrespect. You learn it when the people you love take more and more from you, not because they are cruel, but because you never taught them where your limit was. You never taught them how to treat you because you never believed you deserved to be protected from the pain you were enduring. You begin to notice how subtle self-destruction can be. It looks like always answering the phone, even when you're exhausted. It looks like giving someone another chance, even when their apologies have lost their meaning. It looks like suppressing your truth to keep the peace. It looks like staying quiet to avoid conflict. It looks like accepting behavior that bruises your heart because you fear losing someone more than losing yourself. It looks like pouring and pouring until you are empty and calling that love. But slowly, the body remembers the price. Your spirit remembers the weight. Your heart remembers the ache. You begin waking up every day feeling drained, heavy, unappreciated, unseen. You begin noticing how much you've given and how little has been returned. You begin noticing that your love has turned into labor, endless, unpaid, unrecognized emotional labor that is breaking you from the inside. And then one day, something inside you whispers, "This isn't love. This is self-neglect disguised as devotion." That whisper becomes a knowing. That knowing becomes a shift. And that shift becomes a revolution. You start seeing the truth with clear eyes. You were loving others at the cost of betraying yourself. You were setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. You were burning your energy to sustain relationships that should have been held by both hands, not just yours. You were accepting crumbs because you had convinced yourself crumbs were enough. And suddenly, you begin to understand the power of boundaries, not as walls, not as rejection, not as distance, but as love's most sacred foundation. Boundaries say, "I love you, but I also love myself. I care for you, but not at the expense of my mental and emotional well-being. I can support you, but I will not destroy myself in the process. I can give, but I will not bleed." Boundaries are the place where love becomes healthy, where love becomes sustainable, where love becomes mutual. Without them, love becomes a place where you lose yourself. You learn that it is not your responsibility to carry someone's healing on your back. It is not your job to fix someone at the cost of your own wholeness. It is not your duty to endure mistreatment just because you care. It is not your obligation to break yourself so someone else can stay comfortable. You begin to realize that the fear of losing someone has kept you from noticing how much you were already losing: your peace, your joy, your identity, your strength, your voice. And when you finally step back, when you finally set a boundary, the world does not end, but the illusion does. Your self-neglect does. Your exhaustion does. Your quiet suffering does. You begin to breathe again. You begin to remember yourself. You begin to see the beauty of loving from a place of fullness instead of depletion. Boundaries become a form of self-love, not selfishness. Because the truth is, if you destroy yourself to keep someone else, you lose them anyway, and you lose yourself twice. You learn that real love is not about sacrifice and suffering. Real love is not about enduring disrespect. Real love is not about giving endlessly without being replenished. Real love is built by two people who both pour, both respect, both show up, both grow. Real love honors the dignity of both hearts. Real love thrives in clarity, truth, honesty, communication, and mutual effort. And you begin to see that anyone who loves you will not be threatened by your boundaries. They will not resent your self-respect. They will not punish you for protecting your peace. They will not require you to shrink so they can feel tall. They will not demand endless forgiveness for repeated wounds. People who love you will meet you at the line you draw. People who love you will adjust, learn, listen, and grow. People who love you will not let you destroy yourself just to keep the relationship alive. And the ones who walk away because you set a boundary, they were sustained by your lack of one. Their leaving is not a loss, it is a revelation. You learn that boundaries do not push away the right people. They filter out the wrong ones. You learn that protecting your heart does not mean limiting your love. It means strengthening it. It means loving in a way that does not empty you. It means loving with clarity instead of confusion. It means loving with honesty instead of fear. It means loving from fullness instead of desperation. You learn that a relationship without boundaries becomes a relationship without balance. And a relationship without balance becomes a relationship without respect. And a relationship without respect becomes a place of emotional starvation. But with boundaries, love becomes a place of growth, safety, and truth. It becomes a place where two people can rise, not just one. It becomes a place where both hearts matter. When you understand this, you begin to choose differently. You choose peace over people-pleasing. You choose honesty over silence. You choose balance over burden. You choose connection over codependence. You choose truth over tolerance. You choose yourself, not as an act of selfishness, but as an act of survival, of healing, of awakening, and you begin to love in a new way, a way that does not ask you to disappear, a way that allows you to stay whole, a way that lets your heart remain open without being torn apart, a way that honors the soul you have fought so hard to protect. You learn slowly but surely that love without boundaries is not love. It is the quietest form of self-destruction, and you refuse to destroy yourself ever again. It is not a lesson learned in comfort, and certainly not one learned quickly. It is a truth shaped by years of trying to carry the weight of other people's wounds, by trying to mend hearts that were not ready to be whole, by pouring your spirit into places where the soil was too dry to grow anything. You learn this truth slowly, through disappointment, through compassion, through exhaustion, through love that tried too hard, and through pain that lingered longer than it should have. And one day, quietly and inevitably, you realize healing cannot be forced on anyone, not by love, not by patience, not by effort, not by hope. Every soul must choose its own healing. You discover this truth when you find yourself trying again and again to help someone see their worth, but they keep choosing the same patterns that hurt them. You discover it when you spend hours holding someone through their darkness, only to watch them walk right back into the same storms. You discover it when you invest your time, your energy, your emotion, believing that your love might be the turning point, but it isn't because they are not ready. You discover it when your heart begins to ache from carrying the emotional weight someone else refused to face. At first, it feels frustrating. It feels confusing. It feels personal. You think, why won't they change? Why can't they see what I see? Why don't they listen when I'm trying to help them? You blame yourself. You blame your approach. You blame your timing. You think maybe if you try harder, explain better, stay longer, soften more, they will finally wake up and heal. But healing is not something people do because you want it for them. Healing is something they choose because they finally want it for themselves. You begin to understand that people cling to their wounds for reasons you cannot always see. Their patterns, their fears, their self-sabotage, their cycles, they all have roots. Roots in childhood, roots in trauma, roots in beliefs they inherited, roots in pain they never learned to express, roots in survival mechanisms that once kept them safe but now keep them stuck. You cannot force a soul to let go of its coping mechanisms, not even through love. Because healing feels like dying to the person they have always been. And not everyone is ready for that death. Not everyone is ready to face themselves. Not everyone is ready to break the patterns that have become familiar, even if those patterns hurt. You learn that you can offer support, but you cannot control outcome. You can guide, but you cannot push. You can comfort, but you cannot carry. You can love deeply, but you cannot use love to drag someone toward freedom. And the moment you accept that, a great burden lifts from your spirit. You stop taking responsibility for the healing that does not belong to you. You stop confusing compassion with responsibility. You stop mistaking helping with saving. You stop believing that your presence alone can transform someone who refuses to transform themselves. You start to understand that everyone has their own timing. Some people need to fall before they stand. Some need to break before they rebuild. Some need to lose what they cherish before they realize they must change. Some need to experience consequences before they awaken. Some need to face their darkest truth before they seek light. Healing is not linear. Healing is not convenient. Healing is not something you can hand to someone like a gift. Healing is a choice, a brave, uncomfortable, deeply personal choice. And not everyone is ready to choose it at the same time you want them to. There is a moment in this realization, a moment both painful and freeing, when you step back and finally allow people to walk their own path. You stop trying to rescue them from their decisions. You stop giving advice to ears that are not listening. You stop fighting for someone's transformation more than they are willing to fight for it. You stop breaking yourself trying to pull someone out of a place they are not ready to leave. This stepping back is not abandonment. It is respect for their journey and for your own. You learn to detach with love. You learn to support with boundaries. You learn to care without carrying. You learn to love without losing yourself. And strangely, this is where real compassion begins. Because compassion without boundaries becomes enabling. Compassion without wisdom becomes interference. Compassion without understanding becomes control. But true compassion honors the truth that each person's healing belongs to them, not to you, not to your expectations, not to your timeline. True compassion looks like saying, I believe in you, but I cannot walk your path for you. I love you, but I will not destroy myself trying to fix what you must face. I am here if you reach for help, but I will not carry what is not mine. You learn that being responsible for your own healing is already a full-time commitment. Your childhood wounds, your fears, your insecurities, your triggers, your emotional patterns, they are all calling for your attention. And you cannot heal yourself while dedicating your life to healing others who refuse to rise. There's a deep and quiet power in finally turning inward. You realize that the time you spent trying to save others was often time you were avoiding parts of yourself. You begin to understand that your energy is sacred, your emotional capacity is limited, your peace is not a resource to be endlessly drained. And when you reclaim your energy, clarity returns, strength returns, self-respect returns, inner peace returns. You start to see healing with new eyes, not as something you can do for others, but as something you can only inspire by embodying it yourself. Your growth becomes your message. Your boundaries become your strength. Your self-respect becomes your example. Your peace becomes your leadership. You begin noticing that the people who are ready to heal recognize your efforts and your boundaries. They rise with you. And the people who are not ready fall away, not because you failed them, but because their path is different from yours. You no longer cling to the illusion that you can be the savior in someone else's story. You no longer confuse love with sacrifice. You no longer tie your worth to how much you can fix. You no longer believe that healing someone else will heal your own wounds. Instead, you learn how to hold space without holding responsibility. You learn how to support without suffocating. You learn how to love without losing yourself. You learn how to offer wisdom without forcing change. You begin to trust life more. You begin to trust divine timing more. You begin to trust that every soul awakens when it is ready, not 1 second sooner. And you begin to trust yourself, the part of you that knows when to stay, when to step back, when to walk away, and when to simply let life teach someone what you could not. This understanding does not make you colder. It makes you wiser. It does not make you less loving. It makes your love healthier. It does not make you distant. It makes you grounded. You love now with clarity instead of desperation. You support with balance instead of burnout. You help with wisdom instead of fear. You connect with truth instead of illusion. You understand now that every soul must choose its own healing, and that realization frees you. It frees your heart, it frees your spirit, it frees your energy, it frees your life. You stop apologizing for walking away from emotional chaos when you finally understand that your peace is not a luxury, it is a necessity. There comes a turning point in your life where you become tired, not the kind of tired that sleep can fix, but the kind that grows from carrying storms, that were never yours to hold. You realize that some people do not live in calm, they live in conflict. They breathe in chaos the way others breathe in air, and you, with your soft heart and your desire to help, tried to make space for them. You tried to understand them, comfort them, and carry them through every emotional hurricane they stirred up. But eventually, a moment arrives when your spirit whispers, "No more." That whisper becomes your truth. When you walk away from emotional chaos, you are not being cruel. You are being honest. You are acknowledging that staying in an environment filled with tension, manipulation, or emotional instability is slowly eroding who you are. You stop apologizing because you finally grasp that choosing yourself is not an offense. It is a declaration that your life, your energy, and your sanity have value. You recognize that love cannot thrive in places built on confusion and unpredictability. Peace cannot grow where drama is always waiting at the door. Walking away is not weakness. It is clarity. It is seeing that you were never meant to shrink yourself to fit inside someone else's disorder. It is understanding that no amount of loyalty can justify losing yourself. It's realizing that sometimes people do not want healing. They want attention, reaction, and a source of emotional fuel. They want someone to absorb their pain so they don't have to face it. And for too long, you may have played that role without noticing how much of yourself you were giving away. But a healed heart grows wiser. A tired soul becomes brave. And one day, you refuse to be the emotional sponge for someone who refuses to dry their own storm. You stop apologizing because you learn to trust your intuition, those quiet warnings that told you something was off long before you admitted it. You stop ignoring the discomfort. You stop silencing the truth. When your energy feels heavy around someone, that is reason enough to step away. You don't need betrayal or destruction to justify your exit. Discomfort is reason. Draining conversations are reason. Constant conflict is reason. The simple knowing that something is not right is reason. And when you honor that inner knowing, you don't apologize for following it. There is freedom in reaching the point where you no longer feel responsible for fixing emotional messes that were created long before you arrived. You begin to understand that some people thrive in dysfunction because it is familiar to them. Their chaos is their comfort zone. And no matter how much compassion you offer, how many chances you give, or how much emotional labor you invest, they will not change until they choose to. Their healing is not your responsibility. Their peace is not your burden. Their storms are not your home. When you walk away from emotional chaos, you reclaim your strength. You reclaim your time, your energy, and your sense of self. You rediscover how deeply you deserve ease. You learn the beauty of quiet mornings without anxiety, conversations that do not feel like emotional warfare, and relationships that do not demand constant sacrifice. You taste what life feels like when you are not exhausted from managing someone else's instability. And in that peace, you realize just how much chaos you had accepted as normal. You stop apologizing because you finally see that your boundaries are not walls of rejection. They are doors of protection. Boundaries are how you love yourself. Boundaries are how you tell the world, I matter too. Every time you walk away from chaos, you walk toward alignment. You create space for relationships that are mutual, respectful, steady, and sincere. You create space for people who communicate instead of manipulate, who reflect instead of blame, who take responsibility instead of projecting. Life becomes lighter when you stop entertaining what drains you. For a long time, you may have felt guilty for leaving. You may have worried that you were abandoning someone, disappointing someone, or failing to support them. That guilt is the residue of old patterns, patterns built on people-pleasing, empathy, overdrive, and the belief that you must earn your place in someone's life by carrying their emotional weight. But growth teaches you something radical. You are not responsible for being someone's emotional lifeline at the cost of your own well-being. You have the right to protect your mind, your heart, and your spirit from instability. Eventually, the guilt dissolves. You stop apologizing because you recognize that walking away is sometimes the most loving choice you can make for both yourself and the other person. By leaving, you allow them to face their own patterns instead of using you as a shield. You give them the opportunity to grow, even if they don't choose to take it. And you give yourself the opportunity to breathe freely again. You no longer explain, justify, or defend your decision. You simply walk away with grace. Not with anger, not with resentment, but with an understanding that you deserve spaces where your nervous system can rest. You deserve people who bring calm, not confusion. You deserve relationships that uplift you, not unravel you. And anyone who cannot meet you at that level of peace does not belong in the inner chambers of your life. When you stop apologizing for walking away from emotional chaos, you reclaim your power. You reclaim your story. You reclaim your right to live a life filled with clarity, balance, and strength. You stop apologizing because you finally understand that your healing matters, your peace matters, your life matters, and choosing yourself will always be the most courageous choice you ever make. Your spirit becomes wiser, quieter, and more self-respecting when life finally teaches you that not everything deserves a reaction, not every person deserves access to your heart, and not every situation deserves your energy. There comes a moment when the noise of the world no longer pulls you the way it once did. A moment when you stop chasing validation, stop fighting battles that lead nowhere, and stop pouring yourself into places that give nothing back. It is not bitterness that brings you here. It is wisdom. Wisdom shaped by experience, disappointment, healing, and deep reflection. A wisdom that does not shout, does not demand, does not force. It simply knows. Your spirit becomes wiser when you've lived through enough storms to understand that strength is not always loud and resilience is not always dramatic. Sometimes strength is the ability to stay calm in the presence of chaos. Sometimes resilience is choosing silence over arguments that go in circles. Sometimes power is the refusal to let someone else's negativity disturb your inner balance. Life teaches you that you don't need to fight every time you are provoked, and you don't need to explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You learn to save your breath for what matters, your energy for what nourishes you, and your heart for those who honor it. Your spirit becomes quieter because you no longer need to prove anything. You no longer need to shout your worth, perform your goodness, or constantly defend your choices. The quietness comes from confidence, not insecurity. It comes from knowing who you are instead of seeking confirmation from others. This kind of quiet is powerful. It is the quiet of someone who has faced themselves, healed what needed healing, accepted what needed acceptance, and released what needed releasing. You have outgrown the loudness that came from fear, doubt, or emotional survival. You begin to move through the world with a soft certainty, gentle but unshakable. You start appreciating silence in ways you never did before. Silence no longer feels empty. It feels peaceful, like a space where you can hear your own truth without interruption. You learn to sit with yourself without needing distractions. You stop running from your feelings. You stop filling every moment with noise, people, or chaos. You understand that clarity comes in the quiet. Strength returns in the quiet. Healing happens in the quiet. And in that quietness, you hear the voice of your spirit more clearly, the voice that had been drowned out for years by expectations, responsibilities, and emotional noise. Your spirit becomes more self-respecting when you finally honor your boundaries as sacred. You stop overextending yourself. You stop saying yes when you mean no. You stop allowing people to treat you in ways that shrink you. You give yourself permission to walk away from disrespect, dishonesty, and emotional manipulation without feeling guilty. This self-respect is not about ego, it's about dignity. It's about realizing that your energy, time, and kindness are gifts, not something to be exploited. You learn that love without respect is not love, that connection without consistency is not connection, and that peace without boundaries is not peace. It's pressure. You start choosing yourself in ways you didn't before. You choose your mental health over pleasing others. You choose your inner calm over external approval. You choose your worth over relationships that make you question it. You choose authenticity over performance. You choose rest over burnout.